to begin moving and also longer to stop moving, okay, than lighter objects. Lighter objects can go much quicker off their starting point and end much quicker as well. Okay, so if somebody's telling you, it just doesn't feel heavy enough, think about your timing. Your spacing may be fine, okay, but your timing could be completely wrong. If you give it more timing, let it take longer, you may arrive at something that's more acceptable. So I'm gonna move this out to 120 frames and see what we get. Okay, now to me, that feels much heavier. And again, if it was rolling, you would perceive this even more, because you would see as it's coming to rest, you would see it taking a longer time to just slowly roll itself out. Okay, so as you guys are doing your own bouncing ball assignments, think about that. You may not want the stereotypical rubbery bouncing ball. You may want to say, well, you know what? I'm working with a medicine ball. I want it to be heavier. I want it to behave differently. Okay. Now, other things about heavy versus light might be how much time they spend off the ground. Let's say this thing is bouncing, right? Now let me go back, just because I don't remember where my keys were on solid frames. I think it's right around here. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So if the ball is bouncing and it's heavy, can it bounce high? Yes, given enough energy. But if it's heavy and it's given the same amount of energy as a lighter object, the two will not bounce to the same height if they're given the same energy. Okay, so if we let's take our first ball, the light one, and we're just gonna throw in a few hops. Right? So let's say he hops every 2 frames. It's gonna be a quick hopping thing. Now I'm going to build a little pattern out of it, because we know that it takes a little while to bounce up there, and then it's going to ramp down. So it bounces higher, then it bounces lower. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay. So that's what the little one is starting with, and it has a certain amount of energy, right? Now, if we really wanted this thing to feel light, I mean, what we really should do is give it some more frames, because bouncing every 2 frames makes it a little bit tricky. But each time you hit the ground, when you're a bouncing ball, remember we talked about the shape of these things should be parabolic, okay? But right now there's this little cushion at the bottom, so I'm just going to get rid of that by grabbing the far end of each of these and squeezing it in. There you go. Okay, and then on the tops, hit my magic key. Again, grab the far end of each of these, scale them out a little bit. Now we've got a nice sort of parabolic thing. Okay, so now it hops a little bit more believably, even though the energy's kind of unbelievable. Maybe what we want to do is actually reduce it as it gets closer to the end. Maybe we'll just start with it bouncing a lot. We'll just have it reduce its energy each time. Remember how much it reduces energy? Remember, it's proportional if you're doing a realistic bounce. So I'm just going to call it like half, all the way down. Okay. All right. So that's the light ball. Now the heavy ball is not going to want to bounce as high given the same amount of energy, because it just won't, the same amount of energy just won't go as far. to think of it that way. So first thing we're going to do is choose a height for it. Let's say that's the maximum height. So you can see how much the first one bounces about that high, right? So this other one, if we're going to give it a heavy weight, it's really not going to bounce much higher than this, okay, as it starts out. And let's see how we do here. It goes back down to the ground. Let's just set a key on all these. Apparently I didn't set a key on every channel here, and this is one of those instances where I really want to. Now, these keyframes are not set up quite as nicely as the others. The others had an even time. These are all spaced out. They're all different. So what I really need to do is choose for myself how much time I think each bounce should take. So the ones down below I think took about 4 frames per bounce. Why don't we make the ones up above here take, I don't know, 8 frames per bounce. Let's double it and let's see what happens. I know now what's going to happen, but let's see what happens. If we're doing 8 frames per bounce, let me ask you guys, what do you think is going to happen? The bottom one's 4 frames per bounce. The top one's supposed to be heavier. We're doing 8 frames per bounce.
Lower gravity, maybe?
What do you mean by that? Explain that a little better.
The space that it's in would be a lower gravity. It's a heavier object, which would create the slower, or which would create the lower bounce. But it's also in a, I guess it's like a longer time span where it's up in the air.
Right, and so you're saying, yeah, basically, it's not going to feel heavy.
Yeah.
it's going to feel light because, and this is something that students in the past have run into. They leave the ball in the air way too long, given the kind of weight that they're trying to achieve. So hold on, 7 plus 29. Okay, I'm actually ramping this down. So it goes 8 frames, then 6 frames. 8 frames and 7 frames and 6 frames in the air. And just to demonstrate it, 25 plus 6 is there. Okay. And once again, you want these things to be on a level first of all, and then you need these to be pitched off. All right, so there's our supposedly heavier ball, which is not going to feel heavier. And I just want to demonstrate it to prove it. Oops. Where did the ball go? Oh, how funky. Let's get that down there. Now that's very funny. So, so basically, it's did I grab the wrong one? It's doing something weird here. It's just moving so fast and so far that you're not even seeing the bounce. I forgot how far it was moving. Translating. Let's give it a much shorter distance. And again, this is one of those times where you can use the scale tool and just say, okay, we're not going to move that far. We're going to move about that far. Oops. Move about that far. That should give us a better feel. Now, one of the things that you can see that's weird about this, if you're going to have a ball bouncing like this and you really want to compare them, you shouldn't start them from rest the way that I did. That's just not not helping the comparison. Um, so what I'm going to do is just delete that. So now it's starting at a constant rate, and then it will just end. It'll peter off to the end here. Okay, so once again, it feels light. And the reason it feels light is because it's only going a little distance off the ground, but it's staying in the air for a very long time. So what we really want to do, if we want the thing to feel heavy, we want to change our paradigm. If we want this thing to be heavy, we want it to basically say it's not going to be in the air all that long. If the lighter ball was in the air for 4 frames each time, why don't we make this in the air for 2 frames each time on each bounce? And you'll really begin to feel a better difference here. And I'm going to use the scale tool again. And that's at frame 9, I think. This time we're going to go to half the time. No, actually, a quarter of the time, because we're using eighths. Boom, there you go. Okay, and what we really should do, technically speaking, is, oh, wait a minute. Is that 2 frames? Yeah, roughly 2 frames. What we really should do is keep this bounce going until it finally runs out of its energy. Okay, so eventually you run out of things. Like, for example, I was bouncing on 2s, now I'm bouncing on 1s, and there's really, you can't go any shorter than bouncing on 1s, so you just keep bouncing on 1s. But what you find that you'll end up doing is you'll be creating just this little vibration until the ball finally comes to a stop. And this is okay because, you know, objects like a bowling ball, for example, maybe coming to a stop, might have a behavior like this. A ping pong ball, which is very light actually, also has potential for behavior like this, where it just gets so close to the ground and just keeps bouncing quite a bit. But let's try that. See what that did for us. So there you go again. It's you'd probably have a better feeling for it if it was also you know, an even bigger bounce maybe at the beginning, just to show the contrast, to show how it eventually loses all its energy. So let's just add in one more. Okay, and what I had been doing was basically reducing its energy by half each time. So this one I'm just going to push back up here. Make it twice as large as that other one.